Welcome, everyone. We'll just give it a moment here to let everybody join. We'll start in a couple minutes. So just a few housekeeping things for the presentation. Everybody is on mute to start out with, but if you have questions or comments, please use the Q&A window to enter those, and we'll answer those at the end of the presentation. And with that, and we do have a poll at the end of the presentation as well, so feel free to contribute back on that. Thank you for joining us. My name is Matt Shanahan. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer for Lockstep. This is a part of our quarterly benchmark reporting. The focus of these benchmarks is really to look at the impact of different AR automation strategies on collections performance and cash flow. So before we jump into the benchmark details, what I'll do is give a quick overview of Lockstep and some of our experience. And then we'll kind of delve into, what can you really manage in AR? It seems like an easy question, but it's not. We'll kind of unpack that. We'll learn about the three main AR automation strategies, as well as talk about, sort of manual benchmarks as well. So when we look at AR automation, how do we compare that to the manual things that take place today? A quick background on Lockstep. Lockstep's the maker of Anytime Collect. That's our AR automation solution. Anytime Collect makes it easier to collect cash and also faster. And the big benefit is it increases your bank balance, so that's always a good thing. It's currently in use in over 20 industries by more than 160 companies globally, and has more than 10,000 users of the application on a daily basis. We're the leaders in integration. So we have a broad array of connections to different ERPs and accounting systems. If you don't see yours on there, contact us. We're adding new ones all the time. And we're also doing new integrations into CRM and digital mailrooms as well. So expanding that portfolio. One of the reasons we started this benchmarking service is that we noticed that there was a big gap in AR benchmarking today. Because while there's a lot of AR benchmarking services that cover payment behavior, such as days sales outstanding, there's very little data available on what strategies really have the biggest impact on collection performance, i.e. cash flow. So if you're a company looking to reduce your DSO, where do you start? There's no benchmark to evaluate yourself, where you stand versus best in class, and what would you use and why. So we started kind of quietly building a benchmarking service for our customers to look at just this issue. And we've discovered a number of insights, and we wanted to start making that available on how different strategies impact your collections performance. As I mentioned, this is a quarterly service that we do, so we'll be doing updates and delving into kind of deeper and deeper insights on this as we work through the data. So we'll kind of just tee this up to talk about the fact that there's a lot of pressure right now on every AR department to collect cash. The pandemic has suddenly made cash king again, and everybody's focused on that. And management plays a critical role to achieving the objectives that you have for collections performance. But the question is, can things like DSO really be managed? So tactically, what can you manage and what can't you? We talk to a lot of controllers and AR managers in various industries to look at the metrics they monitor and why. The discussion revealed a lot of different metrics being considered, as critical. But which ones really matter? We looked at each metric individually and asked the question, can this metric be managed? And our criteria for that, quote unquote, managing, really became, can a manager directly influence the metric by asking someone to do something differently? And by doing so, see a change. Our research confirms kind of a suspicion we had that some numbers can't be managed no matter how hard managers try, but that some numbers can be managed. So, we found different classes of accounts receivable metrics, each with its own value. At the highest level, AR departments are measuring what we call business results. Business results are things like working capital and days sales outstanding. That represents kind of the culmination of all their efforts. As much as managers talk about managing DSO, the reality is it's ultimately not manageable. Business results are not manageable. So, you as a manager can't go to your staff and say, lower DSO, and your staff say, hey, no problem, we'll get that done for you. So that's when you start to think about, okay, so what can you manage? We also found there was a second kind of metric that, while not directly manageable, could be heavily influenced. We call those accounts receivable objectives. AR objectives are specific targets, maybe, for instance, amount collected. So, your goal as an individual is to collect so much money. But AR objectives aren't directly manageable either. To get the AR, collection in, your customers also have to be involved, and it's their consent. And we all know customers can have different priorities or issues. So what ultimately AR professionals can control is a third class of metric, which is really activities. These are the numbers that AR managers can gather and can influence directly. For instance, number of collection calls, number of emails sent, number of conversations held, percentage of invoices influenced. Fairly tactical stuff, but this is the stuff that AR staff and managers actually do. AR activities are the metrics really that can be managed. And if you want more calls each week, make it happen. If you want more disputes resolved, make it happen. These are things under your control. Of course, the other metrics are important, but those numbers are lagging indicators. Business results and AR objectives today are the results of AR activities last month. So if an AR team makes more calls in AR activity, then it will probably collect more money in AR objective. If past due is lower and lower DSO, and a bigger bank balance will result, and that's the business result. So that's the importance of understanding activities. So let's look at, manual accounts receivable benchmarks. So we dig into these a lot. And through our own surveys, we've surveyed over 900 individuals across different organizations. We've also, in all of our implementations, we do a before and after snapshot to kind of look at things. In our benchmarks, AR staff, without, in a manual process, really require 25 to 40 minutes per phone call. So this includes prep time to chase down information in different areas, call time with the customer, and then post-call administration, write-ups and notes and updating your Excel spreadsheet with a promise or something along those lines. And it's this combination of through a combination of phone calls and emails, so emails are usually faster to do, about 40 to 60 outbound communications can be done per day. The limited number of AR staff means that really less than 10% of customers are contacted after that initial invoice presentment. And that's because staff is typically focused on the 60 days past due and above. And that's really one of those things of you should be touching every single one of your customers, at each stage of the aging cycle. And it's easy to see why. Most accounting departments use Outlook and Excel for their technology stack. With no integration, it means that data is constantly being manually transcribed between emails and the ERP. With no automation, it means that follow-ups, promise tracking, and dispute resolution is all manual. With no activity management, it means visibility into what's got done isn't available and it's hard to control. And this has really been exposed by the remote work situation. So the underlying conditions of accounts receivable have been kind of borne out from the pandemic. The pandemic exposed the problem of manual processes, as we talked about. The workload has increased because there's increased collections risk, right? All those traditional credit scores are out the window, and AR staff want to contact as many customers as possible. Who should you call first? All of that kind of stuff. And then, installment plans are becoming more common, and the need to extend payment terms and obtain promises. All these confirmations, plans, extensions, and promises need to be recorded and tracked, but where, how? It's all spreadsheets, right? So it's a manual process built on Outlook and Excel. There's also been what we call office anchors. Many, office phones aren't being forwarded to mobile numbers. So without telephony integration, voicemails are being left in the office, and you're having to try and call into the corporate system and get them out, meaning things are delayed. And then, things like paper checks going into the office sort of delay things as well, because if you don't provide people an online experience to pay you, then they're going to send you a check, and that complicates and slows down the AR process. And then finally, the pandemic also exposed the limits of manual reporting. What used to be weekly forecasts is now becoming daily. The growing requirements on AR staff is then to cut and paste and send out to an email distribution list on all this stuff. And for yourself, how do you know who's working on what got done, right? If everybody's working in Outlook and Excel, it's impossible to see what's going on inside those, each different individual. So these are questions that, you can't answer anymore by walking around the room and talking to people or watching to make sure that they're keeping up with their work. So, and by the way, if that reporting is manual, it's going to be self-reporting. It takes away valuable time from the collections effort, and you're not even sure if it's correct. So those are some of the issues that have really come about, as a result of kind of a manual process built on Outlook and Excel. So AR automation is really about changing all of that, and there's three main strategies to make that happen. And the benchmarks we'll go through, we'll talk about what's the difference between being on a manual process versus an automated one, and what it can do to your collections performance. So first is one strategy is automated customer communications. So being able, whether it's onboarding, presentment, reminders, all of those transactional communications can be automated. And what that means is that, when we talk about the influence that you can have on customers, the more you communicate with them, right, the more you can influence or nudge them into an action that you want them to be able to take. So without automated communications, what we talked about, using Outlook, you're typing those out. There's no templates. They're not personalized. They're manual. They're expensive. With automated communications, you have a personalized, timely communication to every single one of your customers, and even in that case, multiple maybe contacts within a customer. The second strategy is really customer self-service. You can save a lot of time, and you can help customers pay faster by giving them tools that allow them to process their invoices in a much more effective way. So be able to pay you online, automate remittance flow back to you so that it can automate cash application, let them get, rather than emailing you asking for things, let them go get it for themselves. And then finally, there's collections activity management, which is really replacing Outlook with a tool that starts to automate things like getting invoices ready for the collector to be able to make a call, automating dialing of the calls, automating reporting of what got done today. All of those kinds of things so that, really the staff can focus on conversations with customers, not on the pre-conversation or the post-call activities, but really just focusing on having conversations and getting things done. So let's jump into the data. The data really comes from 10 months of activity, monitoring this. As I mentioned, we started collecting the data in 2019, about this time. And what our platform does is it takes and records a snapshot every day of the status of accounts receivable for our customers. These snapshots are then used to measure and report their metrics. The companies included in the analysis come from 18 different industries and range in size from 1.4 million in revenue to 1.4 billion in revenue. The average revenues of the companies involved in this was 205 million. While some industries vary in their benchmark on financial metrics, the impact of automation across all of these, the different strategies, was really comparable. So we didn't have to break it out by industry. And so while the service industry may have a lower DSO than distribution, the impact of automated communications was similar in both as a percentage, and we'll look at that. The receivables that we analyzed covered 1.2 million individual accounts for different companies and 13.2 million invoices. There was a range in terms of the invoice values, anywhere from hundreds of dollars to over 130,000. Because anytime collect functionality can be used individually or altogether, the analysis was able to break out different impacts of companies using different mixes of the solution. And then we have the pre and post, so we're able to really look inside individual accounts for impacts. For the most part, we leveraged kind of an A/B analysis by looking at the presence or absence of certain strategies. So in the first one, we want to look at how did automated communications really impact average days delinquent, as well as past due. In this case, no automation refers to not using our automated communications. These are communications that include reminders, statements, past due notices. When we compared pre and post implementation of automation and looked at what was the average days delinquent prior to automation was 39 days. With automation enabled, the average days delinquent dropped to 18. So that's over a 53% improvement. Now, in the new normal, over communication is a critical success factor, and automation is key to that. Automated communications is now really a necessity. Even if you're using automation already, you need to think, how to adapt that. And we're actually helping customers change the frequency and the content of their communications to really represent that. For instance, one organization is adding in a reminder that if they need an installment plan, they should reach out and make contact. So they're trying to figure out, how do I start to change my offers and engagement in the middle of this and do it at scale? The next benchmark we looked at was the importance of the human touch. So AR, accounts receivable is a customer relationship role. We all know that. And when we talk to our own community of what they find rewarding about the role, two factors really dominate that. One is building relationships, and the other is helping people. So in this data, you can again see the impact of the automation-centric versus manual-centric approach. So the way this chart works is you've got kind of three buckets of past due percentages. One represents where it's mostly automated, so less than 40% of the activities are manual, and that's what you see in 23%. At the other end of the spectrum, it's more than 60% of the activities are manual. And so that's a situation where you can see the past due is higher there than in the ones where it's more automated. And when we pulled this apart deeper, we noticed that getting a certain mix of automated and manual was really an important aspect. So where the invoice amounts were larger, so typically, for instance, around $10,000, That's where a good mix of automated and manual really had an impact. So that's what you're seeing here, is that the ones where there was almost a 50-50 split for larger sized invoices had the best performance on their average date, or on their past due. We're doing more research into this in our next benchmark to really kind of tease out, what strategies should you use based on the size of invoices that you have and some of the terms that you have. The final benchmark is really looking at customer self-service. In particular, what's the impact of accepting online payments? Online payments, as we talk to people, gaining in priority and popularity in the new normal, just because people want to get rid of these paper checks and then need to go into the office if you're going remote. It's also slow through the mail and everything else. Matter of fact, one thing we heard from our community discussion is that transit time of checks has been materially impacting, actually adding an extra 7 days because of the postal situation. So on the customer self-service, it makes it easier for customers to pay you. In fact, utilizing auto pay within online payments lets customers maximize payment terms for themselves. They get an extra 30 days from you and another 30 days from the credit card insurer. So but for you, it makes payments very predictable and your work easier. So what we saw in this situation is the fact that with online payments, those providers, their past due percentage really dropped dramatically, right? So it dropped by a full third. And then the average days delinquent was cut over in half. So that approach really has a pretty dramatic impact on the performance of your collections. So what we saw as we looked at this is the primary goal of all of this is to get to those business results we talked about. So, the business results of increased working capital, et cetera. But you do it through a strategy that really embraces AR automation to do a couple of things. Productivity of your team, allowing them to complete more activities with less overhead and focusing on the right activities. Offloading activities by allowing customers to do self-service, right? So that, when we think about how many activities do customers do themselves, that's something that you can influence and measure. And then the last thing is really thinking about, from a automation standpoint, you can also increase the number of activities you're doing with automated communications. So managing the activities of those three elements are really an important way that you can start to drive towards these benefits. So with that, we'll open it up to any questions that people might have, and then take a poll. So one question came in that said, is this something that we'll be publishing each quarter? And it is something that we do publish each quarter. So we actually will have an AR benchmark report that is being posted, I think, later today. And so we can send that out. Another question was, how fast do people see results? The nice thing about something like AR automation is it's really an add-on to your existing ERP. So deployment is very quick. We typically see kind of full go live within 8 weeks. And then as we indicated, because you immediately begin impacting activities, you start to see results within 30 days after going live, and really continue to improve as the strategy evolves. Another question was just, is there a way to see an overview of your solution? If you go to our anytimecollect.com, there is an explainer video on the site that will let you kind of see more details about the solution itself and how it works. We also, if for any of the strategies, we do have a blog. So anytimecollect.com has an extensive blog. It goes into a lot of details about, activity management, self-service, all of those strategies. So there's some good reading material there as well. Okay, it looks like that may have covered the questions. Give 60 seconds more to see if any other questions come in. If not, I hope you found the content to be useful to you. And as I mentioned, please take advantage of our blog and the resources that exist out there. I hope everyone has a great day.